Good morning, everyone. We're going to kick this off in about a minute. So hold on for just one more minute, and then feel free to put, as we go along, feel free to put any questions and any comments you have on the chat. We are not going to be pausing. We are going to go through the entire presentation, and then we're going to do I'm sorry, we're going to go and do some QA at the end if there's questions. So welcome. We're going to get started in 1 second. All right, 10 sharp central. Let's kick this off. Hello, everyone. My name is Siru Isara, and I am the Product Implementation Manager here at AppSpace, involved in all of our space reservation deployments. Today, I'm happy to walk you through the lessons learned and best practices we've discovered along the way since we've begun rolling this out amongst our customer base. So, I am not going to go into 101 level of detail around what space reservation with AppSpace is and how it works. Presumably, all of you watching this are somewhat familiar with those concepts. However, what I do want to go over quickly is what the ultimate end goal of the platform, such as it is right now, is meant to be. And those of you who know me know that I like to talk just about what's available today. But certain things on our roadmap are so close now that I feel I can talk about them just a little bit. All right, so level setting slide. You know what's coming. AppSpace Space Reservation, a module of our platform which enables companies to deploy hoteling and hot desking implementations at scale across your global offices. By functioning as a calendar provider and consolidating your existing resources with those you can create within AppSpace, you are essentially creating a one-stop shop, a cohesive experience for your end users. And at the end of the day, that's who all this is for. You're gonna see me repeat this constantly during the session. Because we have to keep that in mind, that the end goal is user adoption and a great end user experience. Sorry. We want to make sure that our end users can quickly book desks, conferences, auditoriums, and almost anything we want to treat as a bookable resource via a simple and streamlined interface. We do this by loading representative floor plans, visually mapping resources and other points of interest, and presenting them via our employee app. One of the results that just happened on its own of the mapping and visual representation of areas in your installations is that it's very simple for employees to orient themselves and begin to use the same solution for wayfinding. The ability to search for things we've mapped also comes into play. Apologies. The need to find the nearest break room, the nearest exit, the nearest printer or elevator. Using the same interface you use to find your desk for the day, the office you're going to use for the rest of the week, it really makes people adapt to using the app for finding your way around. And I have this third column here. Like as I said, I don't generally talk about the future, but this is really around the corner here. So far, we've spoken about space management from the employee standpoint, right? Your employees are using hoteling or hot desking to get there be in your office for the day, right? But what about your visitors? What about the people who don't belong to your organization, but show up at your offices demanding to speak to a manager? Yes, those people. However we want to call them, the fact is that we want to make the experience for them simple. And that's why we will be opening up the limited release of our Visitor Management 2.0 functionality, all baked into the same console you've been using for space management. I, for one, am really excited to see it, so let me know, or rather, take it back, let your customer success manager know, and we'll put you on the list to kick the tires on it when it's available. This month of October is the plan. All right, so it is October, and we first began showing this to customers as a limited release in very late December of last year. To only a very few folks, and first, I think 7 customers, before we opened up the floodgates for anyone who wanted to check it out before we approached global release. So what have we learned? Aside from gathering a newfound appreciation for how zealously facilities folks care for their maps, which is awesome, We've taken in loads of feature requests and improvements, which we are not embarrassed to say have only helped make our solutions stronger and more robust. There were some bumps along the road, things we initially thought of doing one way and then discovered it was best to do it differently. But here we are, in a place beyond what we had initially conceived the product would be, and with only the sky as the limit to how great we can continue to make this solution. So here's a quick look at what I'll be diving into today. I've broken it down into lessons learned around mapping, administration, and general management, and rollout for end users. So let's get started. Maps. Why do, and maybe some of you have heard me do this live, why do we harp on and on about scalable vector drawings? Sure, AppSpace supports JPEGs, PNGs, and GIFs, but all of these come tied to something that for me, in the time since we began doing this, has been the decisive factor in choosing the image format we're going with to represent these maps consistently across whichever interface our end users decide to use. Resolution. It's really that simple. All of the ones I mentioned, PNGs, JPEGs, and GIFs, they're great, they can be great for pictures, but for the level of detail and sharpness some of our customers require, I'm not gonna name who absolutely needed to see the extra lines for door swings, every dotted line and every screw on the wall. I'm not gonna name any names, but we need the map images to be crisp and responsive when loaded into the browser, whether you're on a PC or your mobile phone. And we found that SVGs, scalable vector graphics, are the ones that best provide that. And sure, you can load a very high definition PNG or JPEG that would zoom in great, but then you run into issue with the size. And remember, the benchmark for this isn't your fiber connection at home. Your benchmark for this is the spotty 3G network coverage for your 4 generations ago smartphone. Not that we're judging. Of course, if I were to turn the image in the left into an SVG, which as you can see is a straight up export from a CAT file after I've deleted all the unnecessary lines and layers that my customer allowed me to take off, I'd probably end up with an image a couple of megabytes heavy. And then what happens is I'd actually lose all that I've gained by adding complexity to the math tied to each time a vector line has to be redrawn when I zoom. For those of you who didn't know, that's how SVGs work. When you zoom, what happens is it's all math. The browser does math and renders that again, but that's again why it's always so sharp and clear. So how do I get around the size issue? Simplify, simplify, simplify. We have to remember, yeah, and again, this is why we harp on this always. We have to remember what this system is for. This system is for making bookings and orienting ourselves within a physical space, not representing every single tiny little thing in the floor plan. And we also have to remember that most folks don't look at maps like these every day. So by turning the image on the left and using a vector drawing version, there's multiple programs out there that do this. There's no one size fits all solution, and you can use. I'm not going to go into detail of the ones we use, but if you want, we're happy to share, of course. But again, using a vector drawing program to represent the most simple, cleaned up version of the map on the left, I can turn this. It's way too complicated representation that's eating into my download bandwidth into a much smaller size file that's going to load great and will retain all the benefits of being an SVG by being redrawn nice and crisp each time. And I haven't even talked about what using an image on the right is like while mapping. It turns our exercise so much simpler because we don't have to worry about a missing pixel here and there. So we get the paint bucket issue where we color everything because the line isn't continuous. And we can also take full benefits of the auto trace tool that AppSpace provides. So let's switch over to the console for 1 second to see what this looks like. To my application, here to the Tampa office where I have these two. So I'm going to open up the SVG that I loaded. Oh, actually, I loaded this as a PNG. So just for example's sake. So the auto trace tool is honestly the best way to go, right? So when we're going to represent these, I can very quickly come here and map them, sure. That I am not too happy with, right? It's just not, look at the resolution, what I mentioned, and even though you have all that detail, as soon as you zoom in, you're losing it. Again, of course, yes, I could have loaded a much larger PNG, but then again, I'm trading in the responsiveness because it's a small size for the heaviness of every time I have to download this and open this on my phone. So yeah, I could have mapped all of these and like this, and but then the desks, I mean, they're so overly wrought that do I really need all this level of detail? It doesn't even take the entire thing because, well, this is because of the PNG resolution thing. It's taking these as different areas, right? So I'm gonna exit out of that. What happens when we do a vector drawing and everything is consistent? Everything is so simple. So when I come to make my office room, my conference room, it takes the entire thing. Oh, see? Missing pixel. So it's not infallible, as you can see. When I made this vector drawing, I missed a pixel and it took the next room. So not perfect, as you can see, but still loads better when I look at the offices here. It's just taking them in because of the way that I built it and the way that I am, well, I don't want to do a marker there. I want to do auto trace. Auto trace is really where it's at, really. I'm going to save this, right? So let's go back to the presentation, right? So what we see here, we see this very small, we see this very small office, and it's fine. But if this was several orders of magnitude larger, which we have done for customers, the response time is impacted because this amount of lines on the SVG is going to render it way too heavy. We're going to end up with files around 20 megs, 30 megs. And again, as soon as you try to open that on your phone, your performance is going to be impacted. That's just Web 101, right? You're downloading images. So that when you're downloading, if you're rendering the SVG, you're drawing too many lines. So again, if we flip over to this side, so not only is this a sleeker look, which is our standard, but it just reduces the complexity and it keeps things very simple. Believe me, I've had plenty of facilities folks fight me on this, and at the end of the day, they've been very well pleased. All right, so this is how we like and how we have implemented our standard. Our recommendation is always going to be go with the vector drawn map representation of your flow plans. And I promise that it's not because we have a great team that does this. It really does make everyone's life easier. So, I mean, simplicity goes a long way towards user adoption, which should always, again, as I've said like 4 times now, it should always be our user goal. As a baseline for every map we draw for you, we make sure the exterior and interior walls are represented. Relevant furniture inside conference rooms and desks is something people like seeing, so we keep that, we add that. Stairs, elevators, and restrooms are usually represented, because they're almost universal constants around the world, and everyone likes to see them or identify where they are. And unused and unavailable space, like this bottom half, is always good to show and clearly define. So, additionally, it really helps people to represent every hallway that is exists in your actual office, because it helps them get around places. Again, people are using this for wayfinding. They can input, they can be at their desk and say, where's the restroom? And they'll input restroom in their app and they'll get shown. But if it's just a bunch of blocks and it's not very clear how to get there, we're losing a functionality there. So if you have like special rooms that people may want to find, whether or not you treat those as bookable resources or not, you can map everything you want on it. But the hallways, I'm harping on it, but hallways are really important. A pet peeve of mine in particular is the need to show the door swings. That a couple of folks out there insist on showing the door swings. Why? How does that help you book a desk? No, thank you. It's always good to at least show, where the opening is, but I don't need the door swing to know where the door swings to book a room. That's extraneous information that we don't need to put. And when you're talking break rooms or furniture, kitchens or restaurants, that kind of thing, it's always good to represent them like social areas, right? Like this area here, this is a social area. It's good to for people to see whether or not you put a marker on it. The furniture showing there, it's also a pretty good visual cue for people. So This is the baseline, the basic things that we've seen every single customer has added to their maps or requested that we add them. And making these vector drawings and using them consistently really lends a hand to people making quick associations and orienting themselves. This is all you really need to get started. A clean, easy process graphical representation of your office. Well, technically this is Dallas, AppSpace Dallas's office. We're opening up this month in case anyone wants to visit. I'm not going to be there, but someone will, like Sean for HR. Anyway, so we've loaded our maps. We're happy with how they look, and we're ready to start mapping things out for everyone to use, right? Not quite. I say this with a grain of salt, of course, because after you've loaded a floor plan, you can absolutely begin to map your resources out, right? Just like I did here, I could, you know, I started mapping this out, regardless, you know, whether it was this one, I can begin to add this, and obviously anything that is relevant, right? Like a break room. I think this is a break. This is our Tampa office, and I've never actually been to our Tampa office. I think this is a break room. Social, right? So anyway, so I can absolutely begin to do this. So this tiny little thing, I can map it in 2 minutes. But if you go to the Dallas office, it's just a tiny bit larger, right? So, you know, I still want to map these desks. I want to, you know, add some elevators here. I'm not going to harp too much on this because you guys know this already. Again, however, all the things I'm adding, it immediately takes me longer to do than the small office. Now, one thing that you have to remember is when I do it from here, when I add these points, I'm marking them as generic desks. If you see on the right, right? These are all generics, right? So how do I fix that? So because if I flip over to the employee app, I'm not going to see anything because they're not linked to Space Reservation. So how do I fix that? So obviously, if I'm here, I would have to go into each one, link it to AppSpace Reservations, and say, you know, desk 101, capacity 1, do all the information at once. Go to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one. So, you know, if it's only a few, it's not a problem. But what if it's 50? What if it's 100? What if, and maybe one of you has these, there you have 2,457 desks in a single floor of a 5-floor building. You know who you are. I hope you're on the call. So that's untenable, right? You're going to go through all of these one by one. No, there has to be a better way, right? So I'm still going to have to manually map these. But as it stands, there's no way around that. Let's be transparent. But I can at the very least save myself some time and effort by bulk uploading my resources and taking care of a slew of configurations at the same time. So best practice that we have found. Flip back to the presentation. Manually mapping the resources is great for non-bookable points of interest, which you would have to do anyway, of course, elevators, printers, stairs, things that you don't treat as bookable resources, and small to medium floor plans. But for larger floor plans with tons of bookable resources, you should definitely import them first. So enter the upload template. Drum roll, please, for those who hadn't seen it in a while, since we added more options to this template last month. It's now possible to not just set your naming convention for the names across all the resources. I mean, you do have a naming convention, right? Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. You can also specify the room types and subtypes, of course, but now you can also set status. This means if it even shows up for someone, right, active or inactive, capacity, reservability, and of course, just like we used to, you can add facilities so they show up as imported as tags that your end users can search by. So if someone needs a double monitor, they'll input that in the employee app and they'll show up. So what if you don't have all of this information right now? You're still in the process of compiling, you only have parts of it, not a problem. The good thing about this is that you can upload partial information and then go back and change it in 2 ways. Let's flip back to the console. All right, so let's say I'm in Dallas. This is the one that I added. I am not going to touch that. I'm going to upload one, this file. which, as you see, the IDs are empty because they don't exist yet. I'm going to upload this file to the Tampa office, to the Dallas office, sorry. It has all the information, but then I'm going to start tweaking, right? So I'm going to import file. You see, it shows me everything that is being captured, and I import it. Awesome. But I imported it at the Dallas building level, so it's not at the floor, which means that if I go to my floor, we're not going to show up how I want them to. These are all the fake ones that I created. So, not fake one, manual ones. So let's see, I'm going to take all of these except the one I had already created manually, and I'm going to edit them in bulk. And I can do this, of course, you know, change their location so they show up. And I can make a whole bunch of edits here in bulk directly in AppSpace. But let's be honest, it's so easy to do things like search, find and replace, and copy paste in spreadsheets. Honestly, for bulk changes, I found that I would just go to the floor and download everything. You hit export, and what you're going to have now is a file that has everything about it. And now you'll see the IDs are filled out. So what does that mean? That means that when I make a change to this, right? Let's say I'm going to make, I don't know, let's say that I'm going to change the capacity for a couple of them. Put the capacity at 2, 2, 2. And I just save that. And when I upload that, the only things that are going to be updated, since the identifiers are already existing, they're just going to override and do a bulk upload. And bulk upload and bulk, oh my gosh, update of the capacities for these resources. No creation of double resources, etc. So there we go. So again, like, I hope you're with me so far, because I mean, this is like a functionality that I would absolutely recommend. Manual bulk changes and bulk edits are great. You can do them for a little bit, but if you're going to change, like I only have a couple here, but if you're going to change 100 resources at a time, or if you don't have that information first, so when you first load things into AppSpace, if you have this empty, you're going to have that that's all going to be default to bookable. So if you don't want to have, you don't want to go, if you're doing the social distancing thing, right, where you go like, this one is bookable, this one is not bookable, this one's bookable, then it's so much simpler. Just copy paste that here, right, in your Excel file, in your spreadsheet, and it's just gonna save you some time. Again, why reinvent the wheel, right? We give you some tools here, but when you're talking hundreds of thousands of resources, just use the spreadsheet, the upload file. It's really so simple. All right, so I'm going to take a little detour here to talk about naming conventions. So I'm willing to bet that most of you have naming conventions for your resources. So it would surprise you to learn about someone who doesn't. It surprised us too. Now, no one's saying you can't do this without a naming convention, but our recommendation for implementing space management, is to absolutely have a naming convention. There's literally no downside to it, aside from having to sit down and establish it. It can follow your corporate standard, make it easy to identify resource by type, and could also align with your existing IWMS. Overall, the end result is what we care about, and having a consistent naming structure across your deployment will certainly improve the end user experience as well. So best part is that there's no wrong way to do it. You can use whatever works for you. Some people like using just consecutive numbers. Send out the entry to the office and just go clockwise, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's fine. Others prefer to use letters or sigils to identify as prefixes, right? Here's like O for offices, WS for workstations, TR for training rooms, et cetera, et cetera. Whichever you choose, know that AppSpace, we at AppSpace appreciate you very, very much when you have a naming convention, and most of all, when you can share that with us as part of the initial setup of the project. And if we're not implementing this for you, you want to do this yourselves, then your internal teams are also going to love you for it. So as you can imagine, if you provide us a list of all your resources ahead of time, we can simply port those into our import template, compiling along the way all the other aggregate information you can provide, like capacity and reservability. And after you upload that, you're going to find that you're going to have all of those resources already configured at your disposal, ready to be mapped and positioned in your flow plans. So what is our end goal here? So we have our maps, we have our resources. What's next? Mapping those resources. The end goal of preloading our resources is, of course, to save ourselves some time and effort. Like I said, we're not getting out of manually mapping these. When I load them ahead of time, I have all of my resources available on the resource list. Let me flip to the console real quick. So now that I have imported those, if I go to Dallas, you see these are the ones I created, but these are the ones I imported, right? So these are all fully configured. I know their capacity, I know they have the right naming convention, they have the reservability status, all of that information is ready. So I just have to click on it and set the position. And it becomes just so much simpler. And yeah, again, transparency. This is still a manual process, but considering all the work you did ahead of time means that all the settings are set and you have them ready to be mapped. So again, map all these resources, all the non-bookable points of interest, and anything else you might want to represent, and you're going to end up with great-looking, consistent maps across the board. So let's go back to presentation. Oh, one final thought on maps. You know that we can set colors individually if you like, making each and every point unique and special. But that carnival of different colors and brightnesses and stuff can quickly turn into an eyesore. The best practice that we found is that grouping points of interest and based on some criteria and making consistent choices aligned with your brand colors is generally a winner. So when I say grouping, for example, you can make all the exits and entries into a floor of the same color. For example, here are the stairs, right? Stairs and elevators. So like this pale yellow, and very quickly people will assimilate that all elevators and stairs are the same color. So it's a very visual thing. When you pop open the map, you know even from the corner of your eye, oh, here's the elevator, here's the stairs, and that goes across the board for every type of grouping you can think of, whether it's offices, conference rooms, desks, break rooms, etc. And since you can add transparency to any color you set, even those for the booking status, which remember, I can mark whatever I want here, but if it's a bookable resource, the ones I care about are these ones, right? The status colors. But you can also set transparency for them, so you're not losing the whole furniture being visible aspect that a lot of people really do like that. It's a pleasing. I guess it's a pleasing thing. Be able to see how many seats in their conference room. And talking about status colors, I know you think it's probably cool that you can set your booking colors to anything you like. And we had some customers who went with their color is very, very intense. Very intense. And if you see it, you immediately know what brand they are. I'm not going to say who, but it's like you see that color and you're like, it can only be this, right? So they wanted to use that as a booking, as a booking status, but it just when people looked at it on the app, it just wasn't working, right? Again, I'm not here to tell you you're wrong for doing this, changing the status colors, but I'm just saying, like, pretty much everyone I know uses the traffic light system. That's just the best practice that we've seen across the board because it's so easy for people to identify it. That you can tweak it, you can massage it a little bit, change the tones, of course, and then but generally it's going to be like the greenish for availability, reddish for unavailable, and yellowish or orange for check-in. Like the only person I've seen not get this out of the bat was Gary from our Tampa office, but then again, Gary's been in several pedestrian accidents, and it's not a surprise really. We're talking best practices here, and I very recently adopted a best practice just from something I learned last week from a customer because I had not done this before, and they wanted to do it this way, and I thought it was so cool. So they're making all-day booking. right? So they figured that desks weren't going to be available anyway, for the check-in period. So, you had the green, the red, and some of them were yellow because people had to check in. So they made their unavailable and the check-in colors the same tone of red. I think maybe a slighter red. Anyway, this is a clear indication for someone that, even if I see a check-in desk that maybe I do have some time to sit there before the person comes for their booking. I mean, they don't want that experience. They want people to have that, from midnight to midnight, that is their booking. So they made these two colors the same. So all the checking status and all the unavailable status are red. And, it's a clear indication that desk, stay away from it. It's not going to be available for the rest of the day. And I really like that. So I'm parroting it back to you, and I'm going to pretend it was my idea moving forward. That's how I roll. Okay, enough about maps. Let's assume you've done all of that, and now you want to get into the slightly more complex part of the configuration of the platform. So the first thing I want to cover is something we've known since day one, because it's directly translatable from our many years as a digital signage experts. And that is that user groups are perfect for curating granular access. I'm going to repeat that just because it sounds so good. User groups are perfect for curating granular access. Since any app-based user can belong to multiple user groups, by managing their membership and tying it to permissions, I can easily control who can see what, whether it's specifically one office or an entire floor or section or a building. Take advantage of your user groups. They're there for you. The clearest example is the typical, I only want these offices to be booked by execs. Not a problem. Let's flip over to the console, go to user groups, go to users. So I make, I don't have a group. I create a user groups and say VP level. And we're going to add some members to this group. So let's go to all users. I'm going to make Mr. Butcher part of the VP level. Take away his other permissions. And Tobias Funke. All right. So what the flip side of this, of course, now I code reservations, and I can come to the Dallas office and say, all these offices are only available. I have to do it in bulk too, of course. Manage permissions. So these offices are only available to the VP level. And that's very quickly a way. I mean, they won't even see it. Anyone else who's not a member of that user group is not even going to see the resource as available. So again, your user groups are perfect for curating granular access. I'm sorry I keep repeating it, but it's so simple. Alternative, of course, we could have also gotten the same result by enforcing a rule and targeting it to the same user group. I could have, say, maybe, let's say, I could have made a rule that says, limited restricted days and times, and say certain times. I could have gotten the same results using a rule, but again, the user group level is, I think, a little bit more elegant. And I haven't really targeted this to the offices anyway. I have to do this for each office too, right? So user group levels are great for granular access. Now, we have a lot of options for setting constraints and checkpoints, right? So let's go back to the presentation. This is great, having so many options, but something we see folks running into a lot are rules or settings that step on each other, or at the very least getting each other's way. The perfect example of this is the following scenario. Let's say I don't want multiple users using the same desk during the day. So I set the default duration to all day. But then I also want to double down by enforcing a minimum reservation duration and thinking that, I want this to set this as 1 day too. Now, in this case, what's going to happen is that these are working against one of these is working against my end goal, because one says that no matter when you get to the office, that desk is booked for midnight to 11:59 that day for you. But the other one, what it's actually saying is that it's 24 hours, counted 24 hours from when you book it. So if I toggle out of default all day and I say I'm going in at 2 p.m., my second one is going to sabotage the all day setting and make my booking extend to 2 p.m. on the same day. So the second one is working against my end goal. So I only really want to make an all day booking for someone per day, no sharing of desk. So I don't really need the second one, right? The best way that we've seen to go about enforcing your constraints is just to begin at the lowest setting. And by that, I mean, the very simplest requirement that meets your end goal, and then see whether you actually need more rules or not. It's the same with checkpoints, right? With a multitude of options we have for setting these up, talking about the validity of the checkpoints, but also the interval can be confusing. But these are all options designed to address very niche cases that some of you have presented us with as requirements. So the checkpoint one is a great moment of learning for us. So this particular let me flip to the console. This particular customer, they wanted to see a message. Could be anything. They wanted to see a message. I gotta do this at the Dallas office. They wanted to see a message checkpoint, and no, they wanted to agree or disagree, and they just wanted to see a certain piece of content. I'm going to say they wanted, for some reason, they want to see these two little bitty videos of two little birds. But they don't want their people to see this every day. Okay, so the reality is the message was an attestation that they are not going to use this for an emergency. This is just for bookings, right? So, but they don't want people to have to do this every time they make a booking. So what they did, playing with all these options, we didn't have this. We actually released this for them. Were these these choices that can be tricky to set up. So let's say I wanted this to happen every 6 months. So I'm setting up a checkpoint that is going to be valid. My attestation of that checkpoint, meaning I agree with these conditions, has to be valid for 6 months. So I'm just going to say it's going to be valid for how many 6 months? Yeah, there we go, 180 days. And I wanted this to show up again at the 6 month mark. So I have to, what is my, same deal. No, not 90 months. Sorry, no, not 2. All right. So I have to make these two match. So I get, what's the end result? As of January 1st, I see this attestation. I say yes. And then for 6 months, I am just making my bookings without seeing this. 6 months rolls along, and then I see this again. I hit that one more time, and then I just keep on living my life. The best way to set these kinds of things and very, very niche use cases is literally to just sit down and test them. And this is why we insist that our customers take part of the QA process once we've set all these configurations. We've seen many occurrences that we implement a rule, and it turns out that wasn't what the actual end goal was, what they were actually trying to achieve. So basically, again, let's see, let's go back to the presentation. No, we're not talking about that yet. Okay, so we talked about checkpoints. Okay, so let's see, I kind of lost my place here. Apologies. Okay, so check-ins is the next thing on my list. Check-ins is something that also is tripping up a lot of folks, and that we've seen. And there are different ways to implement them. There's different end results as well that people need. So the check-in window of availability before and after an event starts can be confusing, particularly if you're enforcing other limitations at the same time, like minimum reservation duration and all that stuff. So a lot of times people question what the check-in option is there for. And when people see the check-in option, when does it show up, in their app? So just to boilerplate answer, they see the check-in option as soon as the window to check-in opens. Now, this does not happen if they make the booking within the check-in window. I know, kind of weird, but they'll get an email notification about getting, if I make a booking for tomorrow, I have an hour to check in ahead of my meeting. My meeting's at 9. I have at 8 a.m. I'm going to get an email that says you can check in. Remember to check into your meeting. And on my employee app, I'm going to see the check-in option as well, right? So if I were to forget to make a booking, get to the office at 8:30, my meeting's at 9, I'm within the check-in window. So if I make a booking there, it counts as an instantaneous booking pretty much. So I'm being auto-checked into my meeting. My meeting is beginning at 8:30. So that tends to trip people out, So, okay. And this workflow, it can come as a shock to your end users. It just comes as a shock. It's an entirely new thing. They've never been able to do this on their phones or check into a desk. So it comes with a shock, and it's paired with a learning curve. And user adoption is, to recap, is 100% the success factor for every project. So if the process is cumbersome, if we try to enforce a change in behavior too quickly and in a way that's too restrictive, we find that it becomes an uphill battle to make people use the solution. This, I dare say, would be more on the customer side because of the things we enable you to do, like auto cancel. Now, this is a great option to set in order to accurately gauge your resource management. However, we highly recommend that you give people the chance to get used to the workflow. Checking in is not something most employees think of doing naturally, at least not the ones I've seen. And particularly if they've never had to do it before, right? So being lenient in the beginning, using auto check-in so people don't lose their bookings, I feel, and I think we've seen this across the board too, is really the way to go. Getting to the office and finding out you don't have a reservation because you missed checking in, didn't see the email notification, or you were just late in traffic, that can be very upsetting. And in our experience, losing a booking quickly leads to losing a user of the platform. Okay, so still got some more. So restricted hours. Great idea, difficult execution, as we've found. It can work great when you want to target days and have people alternate attendance. These group of people, again, user groups. This user group of people go on Wednesdays and Fridays. This one goes the other days. But what we've seen is that people don't like it when you restrict them per hours. Like we had a customer who's trying to do 8 to 5 restrictions, and they just did not like it. People don't like being told what to do in that regard. Whereas if you do it by day, they just won't even be able to see the booking. It won't be available to them. So it's not the same, right? It can be confusing because it'll be available up only during a window of time as well. So that was something that we've seen not a lot of people are using. And if they are using restricted days and time, they're using it at the day level, not the hours. But you can't. The option is always going to be there. We're not going to take it away. But just sharing what we have learned, what we have seen during these 10 months. Okay, and one last one before we move on, and that is recurring reservations. In all these months, we've heard the word camper being bandied about like a slur, literally. And I think only a small percentage of our customers are actually allowing recurring reservations. They're trying to enforce a change in behavior, but for better or worse, but that is their policy, and that's fine. We can help you do that. There's no wrong answer to this. Every company has different needs and cultures, but recurring reservations is something people seem to really be against at the moment. Maybe that'll change. I've only seen one customer out of I can't say that, can I? How many projects we've implemented. I've really only seen one customer enable recurring reservations. Maybe this will change, but it's an interesting factoid there. There are several ways to control this, of course. There's the admin global setting for recurring reservations. And we're going to go through all of these too in a bit. Oh my gosh. Settings. Enable, this is the admin setting for it. But again, there's also local rules that you can set for maximum reservation duration, which would actually take precedence and actually not even let you allow recurring meetings if it's configured to last more than a day. So lots of flexibility too. Again, no wrong answer to these guys, much less an all-encompassing setting recommendation set that we can recommend, because everyone has such different requirements. What's really clear, the takeaway from this, sorry that I've rambled on so much, is that your customers, you as customers, absolutely need to be part of the QA process. And that's something we work hand in hand with you to make sure it's meeting your needs. All right, moving on. So everyone loves QR codes. Maybe not love, but people sure seem to like them. To recap, to level set again, so everyone's on the same page, in AppSpace, we host 2 different experiences with QR codes. And I'd like to go over them quickly to help you identify which ones you actually need. The resource QR code is automatically generated for every resource tied to the reservations module, right? So if I go to reservations module, every resource, click on the resource, that's there. That's there whether I use it or not. That's automatically generated. So if you go, and I mean, well, let me flip back then. Again, you can download this or print them, and even print them in bulk, right? Print them in bulk. So however, customize them a little bit, do however you want to, whatever you want to do with them. So this experience, the experience described for this interaction with the printed QR code is basically this, right? I walk up to a resource, see the QR code, and I scan it with my phone. That will open up the resource agenda in the employee app, and I will be able to manage that resource's reservations. Or if it's my booking, if it recognizes that I have booking in that resource, I will be presented with that information on my device, and I can check in if I need to, if we've configured that. So great. There's a certain way to turn this into a physical checkpoint validation, but technically, I can find that on my app regardless of whether I scan the code or not. Right? So because the app, if it's within the checking window, is going to tell you to check in. So we're looking at making this an admin feature toggle to enforce someone to scan the code in order to be able to check in, which would 100% help me with people tracking and resource use metrics. So there's no more checking in from your home, right? You have to scan the code to be able to check in. So that's something we're working on. And so, okay, so what is the reservation QR code for? Remember, let's flip to the console here, QR codes, resource QR code and reservation QR code. They're independent from each other. So the reservation QR code is tied to the booking itself, not the resource. So what is it good for? This one pairs nicely with a hardware component. You have a QR code in your email, so you have it on your phone, much like a boarding pass. So you hold the code up to a scanner, and that processes the URL, and checks you into your reservation, much just like getting into a plane. This doesn't do much without the hardware piece, right? The scanner. So for us, AppSpace, we help you by providing you a device SaaS that for iOS, Android, or PCs, we can leverage the integrated cameras on those devices to basically function as a QR code scanner for that experience. So we're talking kiosks, or at least tablets that people walk up to, scan their code, and we capture that and signal with a green message on screen that they are good to go. So think of this great for building pass. It's a great way to let your security folks get a notification that this person has a valid reservation, because both building pass and workspace reservations work the same as far as we're concerned. You can show your desk reservation and get verified as access into the building as well. Of course, this might be cost prohibitive to think about doing this outside of every resource, but for this use case, it really does work well. And I get it. You can't have iPads outside every desk, so there's different ways we're tackling that. But at the end of the day, these 2 experiences work independently for each other, and we can turn them on and off as required at the top level or even at individual building level. All right. Okay, so you saw me show you the admin, the settings in the console. So let's go through it real quick. The settings tab in Space Reservation is really meant for admins, since they are all powerful, meaning account owners. So we restrict it to account owners, actually. So you probably know we will roll out more levels, more layered permissions, but for now, that is the role you need to see to be able to have access to the settings. Since there's no wrong answer to any of these, because these are all about how you want your end users to interact with the platform. Let's just go over them and let's see what our customers are using. We have a majority of people using just workplace reservations because they don't own the building their offices are in or are interested in setting up these entry control checkpoints right now. So we can actually turn off the one they don't need. However, it is great to see a couple of customers that use both. They use workspace reservation and building pass in conjunction. Currently, it's a global setting, but again, we hope to allow targeting per building real soon. When we talk about sensitivity, we're not talking about those comments you made about your colleagues' little pins that they bring. No, we're talking to whether or not you allow your employees to find each other, search by their bookings. So I've seen it happen really in all ways here. Some are entirely against it because of privacy compliance mandates. So every booking has to be private, while others are completely on the other side of the spectrum and want everyone to find everyone else all the time. We aim to please and give everyone the option to enforce either choice or to default to one, but allow opt-out individually. The default building and workspace reservation names, I confess, I haven't seen a lot of folks change them. One customer did prefer that the reservation be under the organizer's name for when it came time to pull reports. They could have that field more prominently instead of just saying workspace reservation. But that information is already part of the record too. So it's entirely up to you how you want those confirmation emails to be received, meaning the titles, right? What they are called. The default reservation duration is something we're seeing a lot of use of. Everyone is leaning towards the all-day use case. Now, to be clear, this is not enforcing this as a mandatory duration right now. We're looking at making that as a secondary option like we do for sensitivity. But it will show up when you go to make a booking as the automatically selected choice. So when I turn this on, go to here, I have it at all day. I go to the employee app, go to Dallas. And let's say this office. When I go to make a reservation, I have the all day selected, but I can toggle out of it. So that is how it's configurable today. We're looking to now allow you to enforce that basically, if you want. And basically, again, recurrent reservations we already spoke about pretty much. So that's fine. Just turn it on and off whether you want to allow that. And here is where you set the QR codes. I already showed you that. So we're coming up over time, and I am running late on this. I'm rambling too much. I'm sorry. Okay, so you love analytics. We only like them as friends. No, we love them too. So in fact, we recently surfaced our first version of reports that you can actually download. Basically, this is the first time we are allowing you to do so. We have a mountain of information we compile for all the reservations that occur on the system. And all I can really say is that this is just where we're beginning to surface them, right? Taking a quick glance over, this is a sample report here. You can see how important certain things become, like meeting names, the correct categorization of types, and the segmentation of locations, along with other things we're capturing, such as attendees to meetings and whether or not people are checking in or letting that lapse. Again, not much to say other than we are going to keep adding more information to these reports that you can download, and you can do those. You can do that by going to Space Reservation. Let's see. Well, analytics is where we show you. You can actually go to the first tab of reservations, and of course, I'm gonna have. I haven't made too many. This is the history, and I don't think I can actually download the history. No, I can't. Export. When you export all your reservation history, you're going to get this very comprehensive report. All right, let's keep going. So setup. When we're actually rolling this out to our people and going live, you say, well, happily we have several customers at this stage, and they have all done different things, which luckily they've shared with us, and we can generalize over some of the strategies we've seen to drive the main focus of the project, which is, crowd says, user adoption. So for every project we've done, before we go live, it's fine if we're handling users manually. As you know, we currently import folks using a flat architecture because we're not pulling in many attributes from your IDP, but that's where we're going for sure. adding more attributes. As it stands, you can configure an attribute of the IDP that adds an additional layer of permission, and people do that. So making it so that not just anyone who has an email from the domain can validate into the system. No, an approval attribute that you set at your IDP level per user is mapped. So that is all, like a second layer of validation. And this is partly driven by a recommendation for turning JIT on, just so it's just not opening the floodgates and anyone can find. If anyone finds the URL, they'll be able to log in and see things if you don't want them to. But however you leverage the access to the AppSpace account, whether you turn JIT on or not, just-in-time provisioning. I mean, I have not seen anyone point their employees to to public cloud to log in on their own, but because we never expected them to. The point is that SSO and just-in-time provisioning make things so much simpler, and basically use your own corporate credentials. And I think every single customer is planning on doing this. Some of them aren't doing it yet because they're still in the rollout phase, the initial QA phase. But yeah, every single customer is going to use single sign-on. Most of them are doing it with JIT. And JIT just simply streamlines the experience a little bit. More information on this, of course, can be found in our documentation. So managing admin users, though, because single sign-on on JIT is mostly tailored for the end users who don't even need to know what AppSpace is, right? They just want to get into the platform and book resources. But admin users, what we see is typically we are seeing those still being added manually. And it may be for some cases like VPs or exec levels, they are also provisioned manually ahead of time. So their first experience is, it's all streamlined as well. Like they literally just log in. So, we've seen all the types of ways of getting people into the platform. Everyone's using SSO, almost everyone is using JIT, and some groups, typically the QA groups or initial deployment project groups, are loaded manually ahead of time. And when we're ready to, before we go live, we are loading specific people like CEOs, exec levels, and it's like a lot of important people whose experience you want to have a little bit of white glove experience to them. We also preload those. All right. So, as I mentioned, you want to have roles, but one of the things that we've concluded is that location admin is a great role to give your local admins to essentially limit what they can see. Let's say you live in Ireland, you're in charge of AppSpace Space Reservation, and you have a team member in Los Angeles. You want to delegate the responsibility of managing just the Los Angeles resources, maps, reservations, etc. Could be several different people, right? So I don't want them touching anything outside the location. And this is where our history with granular access and how we deploy user group membership to control comes back into play. So we recommend giving these people that you want to have limited access a location admin role, which will limit their experience to only what you give them. So no errand changes to maps outside their scope, no mishaps handling data for other offices. Keep everyone in their lane while you retain access at a higher level. So this goes back a little bit into AppSpace 101 and why a hierarchical segmentation of locations and the permissions that trickle down are so useful. But this is not a 101 class, so I'm not going to get into that. And when everything's been configured, because customizing you're ready to shout from rooftops, AppSpace, we will be there. Presumably before go live, you would make some sort of announcement, perhaps an email campaign, intranet communication, maybe offer some internal trainings. So AppSpace can assist you during rollout via the same tool you're using to have your employees manage their bookings and reservations. Use the entire suite of capabilities our employee app offers by taking advantage of features you already have. So publish corporate communications via enterprise messaging, right? Microsoft Teams, Slack, and WebEx Teams. Reach your employees that way. Have those communications redirect them to the AppSpace app. Include a branded video, perhaps, which maybe walks them through the process and let them find the resources they need during onboarding. So even after go live, our integrations with enterprise messaging can let people know about meeting confirmations and check-in reminders. This paired with email notifications, you're going to give your end users plenty of ways to stay informed and be aware of their bookings. And finally, we just released the O365 plugin. It's technically limited release still, but which would essentially allow you to see and book resources which reside only in AppSpace, the ones I manually created, from your Outlook. So no matter where they're coming from, your employees will have access, all the access that they need. So I think we're done, right? This is pretty much over time, I think. So this brings the first session around best practices to a close. I'm sure there's plenty more things we'll learn from this point moving forward. And we're going to compile this and do another session in the future. But for now, thank you so much for using the Space Reservation platform. And I truly hope that this session has been informational to you. So let me see. Let me see if there's any questions there on the chat. Our IT team has some major projects that they will be busy with for the next few months. Is there a way that we can work with you to implement AppSpace? Absolutely. We have an entirely dedicated team of project managers who we've been doing this now for 10 months, and we're getting pretty good at it. So engage your customer success manager, and we will absolutely help you draw out your own strategy for this, even if your internal teams are too busy. We'll do most of the work. Let's see, if we have not started plotting our hybrid workplace return to the office, where should we start? And is there someone we can speak to help us figure out? Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, reach out to your AppSpace representative. We are happy to help however we can. Someone mentioned SSO, any documents? Okay, so I mean, SSO, really, all of our documentation, guys, is going to be available in our Knowledge Center. I hate to be that guy who just points you to a web URL, but basically SSO, your introduction, just-in-time provisioning for SSO, and this is everything you need here in the docs.appspace.com. Oh, I see Shelly mentioned that we have a Space Reservation 101 class scheduled next month. So yeah, feel free to sign up for that if you want. But that is, I believe that is pretty much it. So thank you.